Joining us, Mr. David Heffernan, and we have Luke Pettigout. Now, we were going to have Luke Pettigout live and in person with David, but since this is the ugly truth is he missed his flight. So at least we have him. We have him on the phone, and he'll be joining us throughout the show. And of course, my co-host, Mr. Nick Turnbull.
How's everything?
Good. You didn't wear pink today.
No, well, I was going to bring that up because I heard a few days ago you had a pink shirt on.
Listen, you were.
See, that's what happens when you start getting slimmer. You start wearing pink shirts.
I did. I lost
a haircut.
I lost like 1.5 pounds.
See?
I got a haircut. I lost enough for.
I got a phone call saying you were wearing a pink shirt, but you changed for some other event you had.
Yeah, I had. What was I doing?
You were a guest on another show. Correct?
Oh, I had. Yeah, I was a guest on Behind the Dish with John Buck.
Right.
Remember John Buck?
I do.
Major leaguer, catcher.
Why didn't you leave the shirt on?
Well, I don't know. I think he's out in Utah. I don't think Utah.
Yeah, that's true.
His audience doesn't like pink shirts. No, but I had a great time, by the way, with John Buck.
Yes.
We talked it up, we chopped it up, and we spoke real, and he's a great guy. And so we spoke about some deep things. I'm not going to give it away,
right? Because
the show hasn't aired,
right.
But anyway, all right. So we have David Heffernan with us. David, how you doing?
I'm good, brother.
Good. Excellent. You're looking great.
I'm trying.
I haven't seen you in years. So David and I, just to give a little background, David and I went to grammar school together. We went to high school together, right? We went to Epiphany together. All right, you were a year ahead of me. And we went to Columbus. You were still a year ahead of me in Columbus. David, I know that you were a hell of an athlete in Epiphany, a hell of an athlete in Columbus, and obviously all that hard work, all that dedication that I saw throughout the years paid off because you were on that one team, the one that started it all at the University of Miami, at the U with Mr. Julio Cortez, which we had last week, by the way, right? And so can you tell us about that journey? How in Epiphany, you played, I guess, Pop Warner there, because we didn't have a team.
Right, it wasn't anything at Epiphany. We
Right.
played a lot of Rumble in the yard.
We played a lot of that.
There's a lot of Rumble going on. So
a lot of that.
A lot of contact.
Yeah. So you played Pop Warner.
Played Pop Warner. I played Pop Warner baseball. Different sports.
Basketball also, right?
Played basketball when I got to Columbus.
Right.
Although that was always a fun transition going from football because basketball had been training for about a month, and so I'd get out there and pretty much for the first half of the season fouled out every single game. and I'd be like, what? Guys be laid out. Brother Kevin be like, Mr. Heffernan, you can't do that. I'm like, brother, So it was always an adjustment. But, and look, had a great time at Columbus. And the coaching, I go back and look now at the coaching. I look at the coaches they've got now, and that's really what set the foundation for everything. I look at teammates I played with, what we got instilled by the coaches like Dennis Lavelle and people like Columbus. Warren Zorsi was our defensive line coach. That takes you through the rest of your life.
Amazing, yes. I remember that. I think especially at that age, it's so important. And I remember because I played a little baseball in Columbus, and I remember they cared. They really cared. They were passionate about what they did. They were there because they wanted to, not because they were getting paid, a big paycheck. And they loved what they did. And Columbus was camaraderie.
Yeah.
We're a family. I just saw you right now, and you said "Adelante, my brother." And that's how
we talk about it. Guys like Albert Prego and friends. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of guys that I went to high school with, and there's a lot of people. They don't stay in touch with them, but I stayed at high school with.
Right.
But when look, both my boys went to Columbus. My daughter went to Palmetto, but went to Columbus, and that's the thing. While it's changed physically, I mean, the structure's a whole different animal now. They've done a great job.
Yeah.
But the feeling and the bond is still there. And all you got to do, look at the faculty in addition to the brothers. Look how long they've been there.
Right.
I mean, they teach because they care about it. You hit it on the head.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are 20 plus years, 30 years.
Yes.
Carter Burris has been there for God knows how long left and come back. And that's because they genuinely care about educating young men.
Yeah.
Which sports did you play in high school?
I played football and basketball.
So you played 2 sports.
Right.
Did I read correct? Did you win silver night?
I did.
So because winning a silver night it's hard. There's a lot to go into it. There's a lot of things that you have to do. So how were you able to do that in high school as far as playing your sports at such a high level and then winning a silver night where it's mostly just like academic kids winning that?
That's a good question. I mean, I was stunned when I won. I mean, I'm sitting in the audience. I was talking to a buddy of mine, Rich Kelly, who went to Curley, and they're reading this stuff, and you read the accolades, and I'm like, I got no shot at any of this, So I was surprised. I mean, a lot of it was volunteer work. I did stuff with Special Olympics and other things. I mean, it's as with anything, if you think you don't have time, you won't have time, but you can always find time.
Right.
And, we all just continue to make excuses, but you can find time to do different things. And, but yeah, I was as stunned as anybody that I won.
Right. I mean, out of all the things I read, that was one of the most impressive things because just playing one sport and you're doing your school is a commitment in itself. Then you added another sport. Then you turn around and won silver night. It's like,
well, it's as with everything. You read these now, and I mean, these kids have gone to third world countries and set up entire plumbing systems. I'm like, I hugged some kids at the Special Olympics and did some other things. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was all good. But
do you keep up with that now? Do you watch? Because I watch it.
Oh, I watch it so much. Yeah,
I watch it all the time.
If you want to be blown away by young high school students, look at the kids that are nominated for and win the silver night. It's amazing.
Crazy.
So,
yeah. Well, you were always disciplined. I remember that. You had fun. You did your work but you were always disciplined. I do remember that. I was all over the place. Maybe that's why I noticed.
It was a crew of people that were all over the place in Columbus. We had the whole mix of everything.
We had a little bit of everything.
So when you at Columbus, you played defensive line.
Correct.
You go to UM to play defensive line.
I hoped so. Yeah, that didn't work out.
Well, that's what I was going to say because I think offensive linemen get the least amount of recognition, but probably do the most work out of anyone. And probably the most important position on the field, and people don't really realize it. So how was that transition from D-line to O-line? Were you upset about it? Because your name's no longer going to be called on the speaker. You know what I mean?
Yeah, unless, as an O-lineman, unless you're holding, you don't get your name ever called anymore. Exactly. That was a very odd transition. I mean, I was about the same height. I was 6'4", but I weighed like 208 pounds coming out of Columbus.
208?
8, yeah.
Oh, wow. You're the same size as me.
And go there, and I'm thinking I'm going to play defensive end first and whatnot. And, they start with the rookies. You got both playbooks. And, we're in camp for a week or so before the varsity comes in. And the next thing I know, they've taken the defensive playbook and putting a ball in my hands. And now I'm snapping. I've never played center before in my life because I started at center, and then I wound up going out to tackle. Then in came the varsity. Senior nose tackle Jim Burt is who I got to try to line up in front of every day on scout team. So the transition was literally almost daily, trying to figure out how I tell my parents I need to quit because I'd get up and look out my ear hole every day because Burt just beat me silly. And then over the next few years, though, Howard had built. I mean, back then, it's different now. You look at high school kids now. There's offensive linemen in high school that are athletes. I mean, and they're big and they're, 300 pounds and they can move. When I played, no offense to our offensive linemen, they were generally the fatter, slower kids, and they stuck them on offensive line. Okay. And it's different now. But Howard, when we won the national championship, our offensive line only had one guy that played offensive line in high school, Alvin Ward. Ian Sinclair was a tight end. Juan Commodero was a defensive end, and he put us all together. And after 2 or 3 years of getting beat by Jim Burt, Lester Williams, Tony Chickalo, Fuzzy Nelson, and the counts, all of a sudden we became men. And then you get into a game, and then it's easy. So it was not a hard transition, but once it happened, and it worked so well because the 5 of us were one.
Right. So Snellenberger basically created an athletic offensive line.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about Snellenberger with that being said, because he's been known. What did he start? He started Oklahoma, UM.
Louisville, he went out there and got the stadium built. FAU, I mean, that's got a beautiful stadium facilities he got built there. And
I never played for him. I played against him.
Right.
And, I knew all the stories about him. How was it, playing for him? because I'm a little bit younger, and when I hear Snellenberg, everyone's like he's a legend and this and that. When he was doing all that, I was young. Of course, I remember him because I was a UM fan growing up.
Sure. No, listen, Howard was the man, plain and simple. But bottom line was, you were terrified. I'm still terrified of the guy. You know what I mean? He called me to invite me to his 80th birthday party up at this place up in Palm Beach, and my assistant says, Howard, Coach Schellenberg's on the phone. I'm like, yeah, right. I'm thinking it's Prego or somebody else, picking up the phone. And the good thing about Howard is nobody can. You hear the voice, you're like, I'm sitting up straight, But he was great because you know what? I mean, he laid it out. He pushed us to limits, you thought you could never get to.
Right.
I mean, he did things you can't do anymore. We had 3-a-days. We had one water break in the middle of August. Okay.
Yeah.
Training.
Yeah.
But what happens is, and my roommate Ian Sclair's the one that pegged it. He said, when a team like West Virginia or these other teams come down, the heat affects us all the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's just they think they're going to die. We know we're not.
Right.
Okay, because we've been through that, and it really is. But man, we had spring scrimmages of 180 offensive snaps. I mean, it was just. But he was from the Bear Bryant mold,
right?
And the Bear Bryant mold was give me 300 kids. And I'll have 80 that can play, when all is said and done. And there was a lot of that. But Howard was a phenomenal coach. I mean, just a guy that knew every aspect of the game, knew how to push the buttons. I mean, to create that us against the world mentality. I mean, when we beat Nebraska, we knew we were going to beat Nebraska. There was no doubt. Nobody else did.
Right.
And he told us, talk to the media. Tell them you're humbled to be out there. You hope you don't embarrass yourself on your home field and all of this, and how great they were. Never doubt in our mind, though.
Wow, that's terrific. Before we get more into the college career of David, I want to touch on when you were in Columbus. There was a year that you guys was it your senior year that you only allowed 39 points in 10 games?
Yeah.
Who was on that line?
So that defensive line, because we ran a 4-4, which Columbus has historically done, was myself and Johnny McVeigh at tackle. Julio's one of the defensive ends, and a guy by the name of Hank McGinnis was the other outside end. Yeah. And your boy Albert Prego, to show you how tough we were, was one of our outside linebackers.
I remember.
Tough. I mean,
you guys were tough. Tough.
Listen. And we lost 2 games that year. We lost 3-0 to Jackson and 8-0 to Miami Springs. So they stick with you. Those are the only 2 games we lost.
Wow.
And I know because I declined a penalty and the kid kicked a 45-yard field goal. It was one of the what was the kicking family, but the kid at Jackson.
Yeah.
And I declined that. Never forget decline that penalty because I'm like, he'll never make a 45-yard field. Yeah, he did.
He did.
And we lost 3-0.
Oh.
Not that it bothers me anymore.
Is that a record? Does that record still stand? Do you know if that's a record or?
I think so. I mean, we had 6 shutouts, and I think on the scoring end it might be, but it's the greatest thing now is somebody started a Facebook page of Miami-Dade County football, and everybody's coming out of the woodworks and posting stuff from their season. We had this, and Grant and I were talking a little before this. The amount of talent, and still to this day, obviously, when you look at it, but the amount of talent, we just kind of take it for granted of what comes out of South Florida.
We spoke about
in high school football. I mean, pick any roster you want in college. There's going to be at least a handful of South Florida kids.
It's crazy. And we talked about it.
Yeah, I feel when South Florida kids are more prepared. They're the ones that are starting quicker when they go away.
I think that, look, I coached a lot of Pop Warner and everything else, and Grant's coached tons of Pop Warner. Kids play at a high level at a little age down here.
Yeah.
I mean, they learn the game quick. And by the time you get to high school, you better be ready.
And, we spoke about because of all that talent, all that skill, we talked about all these other criteria, all these boxes that you have to check off in order to make it. It's like, it has to have your discipline, his injury-free career, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. But last week when we were here, when we had Julio on the show, he said this. He said this story about the tunnel, and I want to get your take on what happened in that tunnel against Notre Dame.
Well, the interesting thing is Notre Dame blamed us as being thugs for all of this and everything else until
was
this
the convicts Catholic game?
It all started to brew after that.
This is where it started.
This is
what ignited.
But they were blaming us, and then of course, like 2 weeks later, it was USC or somebody. Same thing happened. It's by design. I mean, they've got both teams coming out into the same tunnel, but I wasn't involved as much in the skirmish. But the other thing Notre Dame does,
but I think Julio was, right?
I'm just going to say, if there was a skirmish, Julio was in close proximity.
We know that. We both know that.
I'm just going to say there's some things in Columbus I can tell you. I think the statute of limitations is long run. You know, we might have had an issue with some guys from Southwest at McDonald's there on Bird Road. It's possible. But the other thing they did is as we hit the field, the band is coming off the field. So they compress you with the band coming. And it's all just a setup thing. But
yeah,
I can just tell you, as the trumpet player was coming, and my buddy, our starting center, Ian Sinclair, was in front of me, he might have stiff-armed the end of a trumpet. It didn't look good on the trumpet player. Okay?
and that's where the whole thing started. That's where we get our reputation, right? Well, Luke, do you remember that?
Oh, of course, yes. That was definitely that was. I mean, for Miami, that was the highlight of the game. You know.
Yeah. Where were you during that time?
I was at home watching. I had a good, I call my big brother, but I had a friend, Mike Brennan, who was a starter on the team at it was called Quick Tackle. They flip-flopped the tackles back then. But so I was home watching the game, and my dad was there. He trained Mike Brennan to go there, and so I was just I was mesmerized by the obviously the fight in the tunnel, and everyone ended up together, and it was just that was something that these days you see a little more often. Guys come out on the field and talk trash and things like that, but back then everyone kind of traveled together, and I don't think it was much, but yeah, there was a little bit of pushing and shoving.
Yeah, well, that's where we got our reputation. The youth, that is.
Well, I mean,
that's
come
when
on.
we were winning championships, remember?
Those were great.
Those two teams, Notre Dame, Miami back then, Penn State as well. Those three teams really battled every year for the national championship. So, now you can't say enough about the players that played on those teams, especially out of Miami. Obviously a lot of talent, Hall of Famers. Notre Dame had some great ones as well. So it was just every game it was a hard fought battle. It was the game of the year every year, game of the century every year.
Was when you were at Miami, was there like a legit hate towards Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm asking that because I wanted to ask Luke the next question. Since there was already a hate that built up when you committed to Notre Dame, did you inherit that automatically? Did you couldn't stand Miami?
Well, listen, it's as a fan, you're either a fan. I mean, if you play football, you have your teams, your favorite teams. So you know who the good guys are, and it's just like the same as a movie. There's a good guy and a bad guy in sports. And so, not that Notre Dame's better than Miami or Miami is better than Notre Dame, but it was very highly competitive. And so, yeah, that's, when you go to compete, that's how you think, it's do or die essentially. So I love Miami. I respect them for the talent. Obviously, you guys talk about the heat, what you practice in. Back then, yes, much worse. Snellenberger and Bear Bryant, Brian used to take the guys into the woods and chop into the mountains and chop wood for training camp. So these days, kids,
we'd have had mountains. Howard would have done it.
So my family, they've watched football many years, and so I know quite a bit about the history of how things were done back in the day, and it's obviously carries over. I played for Lou Holtz, and to this day, you know, every day I wake up and thank him for helping me get to where I got to as well, you know. So it was just, you know, it's like Nick Saban these days, and you know, Urban Meyer, and you know, guys, they don't come along every so, they only come along every so often. So you have to really appreciate every game.
All right. So, David, one other thing I want to talk to you about your college career when you basically won the championship. Have you ever felt like that again, or was it, you know, what kind of special feeling was it when, you know, basically it was an upset?
Oh yeah, well we were double digit underdogs. Okay, I mean, but it was also the planets truly had to align, because we didn't have the BCS or the college football playoff at that point, and we were 5. Nebraska was 1, and I think it was Texas lost, Auburn and Michigan tied, Georgia lost, and we were the last game that day. So we saw it all unravel to come down to, hey, if we beat these guys, we should be number 1. And
that added to the whole motivation, the excitement, and everything. I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's all the credit to Howard and our staff, in that they looked at it and said, you know, we can spread the field on these guys. We can run these guys like they haven't seen. And everybody, you know, greatest team in America was Nebraska. The second greatest team was supposed to be their second team. You know, they had the Heisman Trophy winner, they had the Outland winner, they had you know, every award that there could be. And they just, you know, and look, to their credit, they were a great team. But you know, we got on top of them 17-0, and their head was spinning. But, you know, again, great coaches, Tom Osborne. They never let up, man. Tied it up 17-17. We go up 31-17, you know, and they come back down to
fantastic game.
Yeah, to the 2-point play to go for the win. And again, thank God Osborne has got the class that he has, because if he kicks an extra point there, they're national champs, even with a tie.
Was that the game that had the controversy call?
Well, no, there wasn't anything controversial on this.
That was Nebraska. I mean, maybe Notre Dame game.
It was a Notre Dame game with a fumble years ago that had a controversial call with Cleveland Gary. Yeah. But this was no. They went for 2. They got it down. It was 31-30. They went for 2 and went for the win. It's like 39 seconds left, and Kenny Calhoun got a couple fingers on it, tipped it, and that was it. Yeah. But what a great feeling, and to be able to do that in your hometown too. Yeah. Was just you know, beyond it. You know, it's amazing.
Yeah. And that was your. It
was my junior year.
Yeah. Right. And then you got drafted by the Kansas City.
Got drafted by Kansas City.
Right.
So
and did you? How long did you play with them?
Well, I was Hard Knocks before HBO started filming it. Okay, so I got quite a bit of, you know, coach wants to see him, bring your playbook, and but I got and all was down toward final cuts. I mean, I got released from Kansas City. I went to Detroit, and Detroit was the worst, because literally there was head coach pulled me in and said, look, I'm keeping this other guy who going to be one other offensive lineman. He played for me at, you know, Arizona State, and he's got a family. I'm like, well, I didn't play for you, but I'll have a family. I'll get married. I'll adopt a kid, you know. And that was the worst, because literally down to final cuts. So there's no, you know, nobody's walking around tapping you on the shoulder. I walked in, and all the stuff was out of my locker. And I'm like, man. And the equipment guy's like, sorry, coach wants to see, you know. And then I went to the Jets, and then I spent a year on IR with Tampa Bay, and then decided it was time.
It was time. So, and you went to law school, right?
I went to law school after that, yeah. So
and today you are a practicing attorney.
Till I get it right.
That's awesome. But you're also you know, you do a lot for this community. And I want to talk a little bit about that too. And you're on the Orange Bowl committee also, right?
Correct. Yeah. I've been on the committee coming on 12 years now. And so now also started last year serving his role of secretary. So I'm on the executive committee, and it's a tremendous organization. Yeah. And not only what they do in putting on the game and everything else, but we do legacy gifts every 2 years. So we rebuild, you know, football fields in Palm Beach, in Miami, and Broward, you know, to upgrade them, to give the communities a place to play for leagues to play, Pop Warner leagues for high schools if they want to use it, for the community to use it.
Yeah.
So
that's great. That's terrific. And Luke, you're also involved in a lot of community work here in South Florida. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. I do. I appreciate Florida in general. I played for the Bucks for 1 year and got hurt, but lived in Tampa for 5, and obviously I've been back and forth from Miami since '96. Played in the Orange Bowl down there, so I definitely appreciate it for what it is, and the people. I do some work with different hospitals, do some murals, just kind of because offensive linemen, we're in the front, we lead the way, so to speak, and so that's kind of how I approach things there with different, whether it's art projects or there's a cemetery that's a project that I'm looking into restoring, which has been, it's been pretty much left unkept for years, and needs to be, kind of cleaned up and, made right. And so basically just community outreach projects. Obviously the sports industry in South Florida is top notch. You can play all year long, whether any sport you want. Enjoy the weather, enjoy the people, enjoy the environment. It's just it's a great place to be, and so I'd like to help lead the way and help other people.
That's terrific. That's great. And David, do you have? Because I just want to add to, because when we had Julio Cortez here, he was saying some crazy stories when we were off the air. But do you want to add your own personal story to this whole, you legacy, this mystique of the U, of especially that year, because he was saying stories. Which was that story that he said about the gator? You remember?
Oh, yes. You want me to bring that? I'll say it.
Same story.
I don't know the story. I want him to see. He has to know the story. Did you ever drown a gator during Gator Week?
He's an attorney, remember?
Yeah, but the statute of limitations. 7 years, right?
I don't know that I want PETA after me, but
well, did you witness it happen? No, I can't.
I've heard stories. I didn't witness it. I've heard stories. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, where do you guys get the gator from?
Who caught him around?
Who went and caught it?
Who knows? Who knows? But I will tell you, and Julio was with us. We went out. This was off season. Bernie Kosar and Julio and a bunch of us. There were these guys that had a camp out in the Everglades, and they were all hunters and everything else. And they took us all out in airboats. And so, needless to say, we sunk an airboat, which I didn't think was possible at one point.
That story.
Oh yeah, no, we sunk an airboat, and I mean, and it's dark out there. But yeah, they were catching little gators, and dudes were clipping them to their ears and whatnot. So we had some fun with these guys out there in the Everglades. But yeah, you can sink an airboat. It takes a lot of work.
Were you on the boat when that happened?
I wasn't on the one that sunk. Thank God, we had 3 of them out there.
So how did they sink it? Did they?
Well, it doesn't sink. It just floods. Yeah, it gets to one side, and then it's now sitting on the bottom. So
at night.
Yeah,
in the Everglades.
Fortunately, we had the 2 other boats. Yeah.
Listen,
I'll never do that.
Nick, you had to have known these guys. These guys could have sunk a cruise ship if they wanted.
I think that's
it was a different time, different day. It was crazy back in the back.
But they did that at night in the Everglades.
Yeah. So, listen, it was the
80s. It was Miami.
It was the 80s. Come on.
I guess.
You were a baby.
I was young, so I wasn't going on airboats by myself. And you guys were driving them?
We were driving. Yeah, these guys owned them and took us out there, and they had a place. We all stayed out there that night, and they had an airstrip, and they had some ATVs, which was also another fun thing.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen a guy on an ATV going across the field get blindsided by somebody, we're lucky nobody broke their neck, but we had fun.
And that's different. The kids these days at these schools wouldn't even think about going to the Everglades.
No.
They want to stay over here in the city.
That's it. I'm not sure that's safer, but it's,
I don't know if it's safer either, but that's different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't normally get that here in Miami.
No, we had, I mean, these guys, and I forget who the connection was, but we're great guys and took us out and fed us and makes it easy.
And let me tell you, I'm really proud of all you guys all of us that graduated from Columbus. You know, we've evolved as human beings, right? And now we're helping our community. And I know you had something that was dear to your heart. Do you want to mention it with your nonprofit?
Yes. So I'm working on a nonprofit now. I started a company that made sports uniforms for the youth.
Okay.
And I started to notice that a lot of the teams can't afford uniforms. I mean, I seen teams get white T-shirts and write with permanent marker their jersey number and throw it over their shoulder pads and play with it.
Right.
They couldn't afford the uniforms I was making, so I started a nonprofit that they can apply for, and we provide for uniforms for them.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So, you know, obviously they got to meet the requirements of being considered a low-income athletic team or area. But, we're raising money for that now, and hopefully we could outfit all the kids that normally don't get that confidence of wearing a nice uniform. Right. You know, we always say just because they're amateurs doesn't mean they have to look like one. So
fantastic.
Yeah. So listen, I'm very proud of our show today. 3 decades of former NFL players, of special guys, of quality individuals that are helping their community. Thank you for joining us. We are The Ugly Truth.